Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gisette Rodriguez, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Passaic County chapter of NJTESOL-NJBE. I co-chair alongside Mary Calergos and Maria Jaume. And this month we're presenting a session called Culturally Inclusive Classroom. And our presenter is Melisa Garcia. So Melisa, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Gisette. I'm very honored and happy to be presenting today on a topic that's very close to my heart, something that I find to be my secret when it comes to education and my success as a teacher. So let's get started. Thank you so much for coming. How do I, okay. So my name is, again, Melisa Garcia. I've worked at elementary school teacher for grades K through 5 for 14 years in New York and New Jersey. I am currently a 4th and 5th grade bilingual language arts teacher in Passaic, New Jersey. So in this presentation, the goals are for you to understand what is cultural inclusion, identify the benefits of implementing culturally inclusive practices, explore different tips and strategies, and recognize key findings specific to language learners. So what is cultural inclusion? Cultural inclusion acknowledges and supports the needs of students from diverse cultures, valuing the contribution that each child comes with. A culturally inclusive classroom brings awareness in welcoming diversity with all students. So as I was doing research on this topic, I came across culturally inclusive practices, and there are 3 strands. There's environment, instruction, and curriculum. So I'm going to break it down. With environment, it highlights students' positive strengths, promoting a safe place for students to learn and learn about each other. It acknowledges and respects their cultures, and it really celebrates their cultural differences and diversity. With instruction, it promotes empathy. It allows students to have meaningful conversations and deliver lessons where it's specific to students' needs and also their special interests. With curriculum, it addresses diverse cultural contributions, which I find to be very important. Students being able to see themselves in lessons with different, for example, leaders. When I'm teaching social studies, sometimes I find that not much is said, and I want to make sure that students can also see other people that look like them, that come from their same backgrounds, that have also made positive contributions to society. So making sure that we are addressing diverse cultural contributions in this country, reflecting on students' identity, empowering them through their interests, and acknowledging that they come with different cultural experiences. So with that being said, when I was looking over these practices, there were 4 key takeaways for me. One is promoting a safe learning environment. I feel that's the first thing. And I'm very big on Maslow hierarchy of needs. Students need to feel safe. And when we think of the students that we're servicing, which are language learners, they come into a new environment and they're trying to adapt. That could be so scary. I know I experienced it myself when I came back to this country at the age of 5. And when students are in culturally inclusive classrooms, teachers are providing that safe learning environment. And by doing so, we're also encouraging, to my second point, meaningful conversations, because students now feel a sense of belonging in this classroom, in this community, making text-to-self connections, because teachers are also allowing space for them to see themselves in the lesson, which leads to the last point, authentic engagement. It's not enough to have students recall information, let's say in a lesson. If a student is authentically engaged, I know we as teachers, I know I hear it a lot, you know, we want to see engagement when administrators come in, but to have students authentically engaged, that means they are really able to connect to what they're learning. They're really able to not just comply, they are retaining that information, and they can make connections and apply it to other contexts. So I'm a big believer in it's not enough to learn about, for example, cultural inclusion. You came to this presentation, you have an understanding. We're going to be talking about it and analyzing this important topic. However, if we're not really applying, then what's the point? It's so important to apply the things that we learned. So I wanted to make sure that in this presentation, I provided 6 tips and strategies that I personally use in the classroom. And I'm going to break them down one by one, but the 6 strategies, tips and strategies is through meet and greet, celebrating multiculturalism, the impact of educational technology, having conversations on diversity, informal teacher and student interactions, and family involvement. So meet and greet. First day of school, something as simple as the Skittles icebreaker. Pick a color. Each color is something as simple as what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? I know this might sound, well, that's not too, how do you get them to really be, you know, invested in wanting to participate? Let's say a newcomer, new to the country. Little things like this matters, because eventually you're going to start seeing that it builds and it builds. As humans, we crave that connection. So I start small. The Skittles icebreaker for back to school night, I make it my duty to make sure that I share my learning trajectory, that I let parents know that I once too came to this country, had to learn the language, that I too can relate to them and the struggles growing up to a single mom on welfare, and how I was able to succeed based on the teachings and the guidance that I had in school with teachers that really pushed me to do better and believed in me. So I love to make those connections with parents, build that relationship. And one book that I always use is Island Born, because it's not just, okay, let's read the book, write about it. Students can do something as simple as drawing. Tell me about your country back at home. What do you remember about it? And you'll be surprised how students start opening up, because, oh my God, is that Puerto Rico? I see the coquí. Or, you know what, in my country, in Guatemala, we also have that too. So students start to slowly see those connections. They love connecting the dots. But another thing that I celebrate is their differences. So at the beginning of the year, I'm very big on all these activities. And I don't know if you can see, hopefully it's not too blurry. This is one of my bulletin boards that I do every year. Island Born by Juno Diaz is such a impactful story of a little girl that craves that connection from back home, but doesn't remember because she left when she was too young. Celebrating multiculturalism. I'm always celebrating all throughout the school year, not just during Hispanic Heritage Month. But however, I am the chair at my school. I am in charge of this event, and I really encourage all teachers to participate. Students become ambassadors of countries that they pick. I do bulletin board contests. I have departments, for example, the literacy coaches do bulletin boards on how different authors, Latin American authors, have impacted our communities and society. And I also celebrate my students this year. This bulletin board is 5 years old, but every year I do this. I love to showcase in my class. I have Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru. I mean, I have like 9 different countries from Latin America. And let me tell you, the conversations, yes, we all speak Spanish, but if you ask a student, how do you say straw? or kite in Spanish. Whoa, you'd be surprised the amount of words. It is just so, to me, things like that just lights me up. And the way they share their personal stories and experiences, I feel that is so empowering for them. And once we embrace students' identities, I mean, they literally hit the ground running as far as like really being engaged in school. Another one is educational technology. I have to be honest, before this whole pandemic, like I was one of those teachers. I shied away from technology. Why? Because growing up, I wasn't really taught how to use it. I didn't have enough preparation. A lot of times we get technologies into our classrooms, we get one PD, no follow-up. However, with the pandemic, as you know, we were forced to teach. We didn't have a choice, virtual learning and learning how to use Google Classroom. I gained such an appreciation for ed tech tools during COVID. Something as simple as Google Jamboard. A lot of students were so shy to turn on their cameras, but something as simple as Google Jamboard, having questions where they could just talk about how they're feeling, really started opening that dialogue. And a program that my district implemented recently is Lexia, which I find to be phenomenal. Why? Because this program, while teaching them a second language, also immerses them into game-based learning. And they travel to France, to Morocco, to Mexico, all over the world. And it's like, it's gamified, and they have to go through all these levels, and they get to experience different cultural backgrounds with these characters, and students are extremely engaged. So I think now more than ever, ed tech is so important when trying to implement some culturally inclusive practices into our everyday lessons. Having conversations on diversity. I have here Socratic seminars, compare and contrast activities, making text-to-self connections, and having culturally relevant text. Another book that I love to use is I Love Saturdays y Domingos by Alma Florada, because when we talk about diversity, yes, we're talking about language and what it is to feel, to come new to the country, but also diversity is, we have two different cultures that we're now trying to live with and coexist harmonically. So with I Love Saturdays and Domingos, this little girl, she spends Saturdays with grandma and grandpa, and then on Los Domingos, she's with abuelito and abuelita. What does that mean? You'll be surprised. Students will share, you know, on the weekends, I'm with dad, on the weekdays, I'm with mom. And students also understand that it's okay to be different, to have a different family structure. Thank you, Mr. Falkers. Another book that I love, to Making Text-to-Self Connections, because there's always, as learners, there's gonna always be a time where we might struggle with something, and students can always connect to this little girl, this character. And I find that to be very important to talk about. You know, we all are going to have differences, but it's what we do with them, and also how we celebrate our differences and how we take ownership of that. You know, we're not always gonna get it right. We're not always gonna have the perfect scores in certain subjects, but just celebrating and acknowledging that we're all different and we can always learn from our differences is, for me, worth having those, those conversations on diversity. And the Socratic seminar, quickly, I also feel when I've done them in my district, we're supposed to do them once every marking period. However, I notice when the topics are relevant to students, when it talks about immigration, when it talks about segregation or activism, students can connect to it more. I find when these topics are relevant, the Socratic seminar, the dialogue is deeper, it's more meaningful to them because they can relate to it. Informal teacher and student interaction. I feel this doesn't really get spoken about much. I like to build genuine relationship with my students, and I always want them to feel like they're at home. And just as I like my classroom to be coherent and for all the learning objectives to go well, I also make time to connect with my students, to be silly, to have that downtime. When I don't have time, let's say, to pull my students for small group, I do the lunch and learn. I also love to pull my late bloomers, I like to call them, to do pair reading. I feel that's so important. And I always love to do, my school knows me as, Thanksgiving cultural luncheon with my students, because I read to them Everybody Cooks Rice, that famous book. And, we all come from different countries in Latin America, in this case, in my classroom. And students are coming with different kinds of rice, and we're all sharing and celebrating and talking about, well, my mommy puts this on the sazon and my abuela does this. And again, we're bringing the community together, and which brings me to my last point, which is family involvement. Just this year, when I did Hispanic Heritage Month, I told my students, bring an item that represents you, or that reminds you of your culture, your heritage. And a student, Alessandra from Peru, brought arroz con leche, and her grandmother made it. And I have to tell you, it was even better than my abuela's. It was just amazing. The kids were all like, wow, coconut flakes. I mean, it was just mind blowing, to the fact that now for our Christmas holiday party next week, we're going to invite abuela, and she's going to do a show and tell how to make arroz con leche. And now I can say, you know what, remember we did informational writing pieces. After abuela leaves, we're going to be writing about how to make this arroz con leche in class. And the kids are just looking forward to it. It is just more meaningful when you involve their families, because it's so a part of who they are. Class dojo stories. My stories, every day I try to at least post something, whether it's students working in group, reading independently. Parents like to feel like they're really involved in that learning trajectory of their child. So I'm always posting in my class dojo story, because I want to make sure my parents feel that they too are part of this big goal to make sure that our students succeed. And with that being said, the big question here is, as a bilingual teacher, how does culturally inclusive classrooms impact English language learners? Well, as a researcher right now, I would like to share that because of the pandemic, I had an eye-opening experience. I really want to better my craft as a bilingual teacher. I really didn't have the skills with technology. I'm currently a second-year doctoral student at NJCU, and everything that I've been researching has been on language learners, cultural inclusion, and just identity and acculturation, and how tech has impacted students' learning. And a lot of the research has presented a lot of these themes, which were, it alleviates anxiety. When you have a culturally responsive classroom, you're thinking of that student that comes in first day and is nervous, but when you allow them to feel safe and welcomed, it alleviates that anxiety. You are promoting acculturation. And I'm going to talk more about acculturation versus assimilation, but that just tells the student, you know what, you're new to the country. Those days of saying you're not in the United States, now speak English. No, now we're saying no. El que habla dos idiomas vale por dos. Bilingualism is important. You are allowed to also embrace your native language, maintain that native language. So it promotes the maintenance of the native language. The collaboration with students, it just flows organically. And lastly, my favorite, it gives our language learners a voice. I think that growing up in the South Bronx, I remember as a language learner, I was always put to the side. Like my class was always that's the bilingual class. And we always felt like there was almost like there was a deficit to be bilingual, to be learning a second language. But we need to start letting students know this is an asset. Being bilingual is actually, you are prepared for the 21st century. You're going to be so marketable and so you could play such an important role in the future as a leader if you really maintain your native language and you really take ownership of everything that makes you you, and being proud of your cultural heritage and background. So knowing the difference, I found this while I was scrolling through LinkedIn recently, and I felt like it was like a message from God. I was actually very excited yet nervous to be presenting today because I'm very passionate about this topic. And as I was scrolling, I saw this amazing illustration. And I remember when I was getting my master's at Hunter College on bilingual education, learning about the word acculturation, and it was just like, wow, a lot of times we hear the melting pot, but with this acculturation, you're like this salad bowl. You see the aguacate right there. You see the mushroom, the tomato. It's still very whole, it doesn't need to change into anything, but it still plays an important part of the big picture. And I think that's what I always want my students to leave with, to know that they too can contribute and can be active citizens and could still be very much themselves and not have to lose a part of who they are to fit into this mold. So as I was also trying to wrap this up, because I feel like I can go on forever, I was thinking about, okay, so if I were to be presenting this to a new teacher, what would I say? So I thought right away, Bloom's framework, you start off with the understanding what we are now here talking about. What is cultural inclusion? We're analyzing, talking about how can I teach this in my classroom? How can I incorporate it is what for me is key, the application, because again, it is not enough to just know something and be able to talk about it. How about let's be about it? Let's really implement these strategies into our daily lessons and classroom environment. And with that being said, now that we're approaching, well, December 21st is technically the first day of winter, but we're feeling winter already, right? And this year, I am reading Noche Buena because as for the Latinos that are in this workshop right now, we celebrate Christmas Eve very big. And for me personally, in my Dominican background, Christmas Day is more of their relaxation, but we go really big on Christmas Eve. And sharing that story with my students and having those conversations where they are sharing their traditions and how it varies from one culture to the next. Just because, for example, in my case, just having Latino students doesn't mean that just because they're all from Latin America, that we share the same traditions. It's very different. And I love to really hone in on those differences because that's where we learn. Another thing that I loved about this illustration was that it says the winter holidays may not look the same for everyone. Not everybody gets a gift. And this year, unfortunately, I have 3 students that are in, shelter, and I do Secret Santa for those students because I know that I cannot imagine how that feels. But just really establishing a community in my class where students are really sharing what does the holidays look for them, really gets them excited to participate and just bring in pictures of their celebrations. And like I said, Abuela's coming to teach us how to make arroz con leche, and the kids are excited and they're going to be writing about it. So I find that through culturally inclusive practices, you really get that authentic engagement. And I would like to end with one of my, I love quotes, but this one really stood out to me. Social cultural theorist and psychology Lev Vygotsky says, language and culture are the frameworks through which humans experience, communicate, and understand reality. And I thought that was so impactful and something that I always like to preach, even when I'm at professional development workshops or grade level meetings. I always like to make sure people know that my students, their language, their native language is something I also always want to celebrate in the class, and that being bilingual is an asset, and they can really become successful citizens. Is just the process of acquiring a second language. It takes time. And I just love to always celebrate my students and their learning trajectories as they acquire a second language. And with that being said, let's talk about it. I did a lot of talking, but I am so, again, excited to be here. I thank everyone that's here today. I would like to learn, this is a space for us to learn from each other. What are some culturally inclusive practices you have implemented in your classroom? And also, what were some key takeaways from this presentation that you plan to incorporate? So I want to open the floor for everyone to talk, and I'm looking forward to learning from you guys too.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Feel free to use the chat. Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute your microphone. This is more like an open space where it's like a sharing, a back and forth conversation. If you want to drop in the chat box any other heritages or ethnicities or of the students that you service. I know that in Passaic, where Melissa works, it's a lot of Hispanic population, but where I work, I have Ukrainian students, I have Turkish. So we're interested to know what other nationalities or cultures you are working with in your district. And I saw Brian had his hand up. So Brian, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. I was congratulating Melissa on the presentation. It was really wonderful. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I mean, I can share a couple of things I've been trying to do with my population. I'm working with high school students. One thing that was really exciting recently is there's a young student who arrived from Ukraine, and I'm pushing into her biology class. And she's really trying hard, but she's really frustrated. You can see it on her face that she's frustrated, that she wants to do well. She likes the topic, but right now, because of the situation, language is the barrier. So what I do is I stop in, I check on her, but now I'm learning some Ukrainian phrases. And every time I use the phrase, I'm sure it's absolutely horrible, and the pronunciation is just, just really bad. I'm sure it's not correct at all, but you can just see this light just come on her face. She is so pleased to hear that I'm at least trying, and it's something familiar to her. So I do enjoy that part of the day is getting to try some language with her. And I hope that is helpful for her. I imagine also it's helpful to see me as an educator trying the language, and to make it okay to fail, and to make it okay to kind of struggle a little bit, to see that she's, that we're all supporting her, and that she will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing.
You see the thumbs up. Anyone else? If you just want to drop it on in the chat, what other ideas or practices do you do? What are the languages are spoken in your classroom? Are there any other books, Melissa, that are not like so much Spanish focused, and maybe other cultures? I teach at a high school, and picture books are still great at the high school level. So I was wondering if you know of any that have that connection for other countries or other languages.
I actually have with me, not so much on language, but this book on Just Ask is also in English and in Spanish by Sonia Sotomayor. She talks about different abilities, that we all have different abilities, and it celebrates diversity and being okay, being different. So that's one. As far as other cultures, Last year, I teach 4th and 5th, and I know that we read Number the Stars, and it talks about the Holocaust. And I find that, I always tell my students it's so important to learn about other cultures and their trials and tribulations, because at the end of the day, there's something always to be learned from these things. And so even, yes, you're right. I like that you brought that up. Even though in my classroom population is just Latinos, exposing them to other cultures. And when the war with Ukraine was first started, kids were bringing in newspaper articles in English and in Spanish, and we're talking about that to the point that students were making connections to, like, oh, when I left Venezuela, something similar was happening. When I in Peru, kids really, I was shocked to see that they're so, like, they watch the news, and some of them were able to articulate things and make those connections. So yes, it's not only about, let's talk about, let's say the Spanish speaking countries, is also exposing them to prepare them to be empathetic and to be accepting of other cultures, exposing them. It's so important to other cultures and ethnicities, for sure.
Definitely. Thank you. We have Jenna, who shared that there's Haitian Creole spoken in her classroom and Spanish. Thank you, Jenna.
And Jenna, thank you for sharing that. You just reminded me, just last year, we had Sophia from Haiti, and I remember just really celebrating, because she knew Creole, she knew Creole, French, and she also knew Spanish, and now learning English. I was just telling this, we were sharing that with the students, and they were like, wow, you're multilingual. And I really wanted her to come into the classroom knowing, we really celebrate everything that you are. You're new to the classroom environment, but I wanted to really highlight that amazing skill that she came with, and kids were really in awe with that.
Yeah, we have a lot of students coming from Haiti, but then also like coming in through Venezuela and Chile. So now they're like coming with 3 languages. It's insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
If I could share a little bit sort of from the other side of it, not from the student side, but I am Jewish. So with the holidays coming up, it's all about Christmas, and the whole school is all about Christmas, which is fine. I get it. But one of the teachers found out that I'm Jewish, and she asked me to do a presentation in her class about Hanukkah. So I'm going to be doing that next week to share the other side of the holidays. And not everyone celebrates the same holidays.
That is awesome. So Ajitha asked a question, anyone, Melissa or anyone, can suggest any activities that can be done in high school. Her students are mostly Haitian, Creole, and Spanish speaking.
I don't know, but I'm always so inclined to, like, with me, who doesn't love food? I love doing luncheons and having even the parents involved, and having this celebration, a feast. Usually for Thanksgiving, if it's more fitting when students come in, and sometimes, well, this year we're starting to have parents be more inside the classrooms, but not because, the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, it was something that I would also invite the families to come in. And I feel when it comes to food, so it's something so intimate about, sharing food with people. And I've never taught on a high school level, but I could only imagine how this can work at a high school level, right? Celebrating students coming in with a dish and just sharing food. I feel that it will open a lot of conversations.
Yeah, with parents somehow in our district, because they also have the language barriers, they don't get involved so much. Even for the parent calls, I usually depend on the bilingual teachers who can actually make the calls for me. The only thing that happens in my class, like students get curious about the ring, and they like, it's nothing like a specific activity during something in the context, and then they would ask like, is that a wedding ring? And I say like, how it's in my culture, it's not the ring, there is a pendant that I wear. That kind of conversations where we share culture, not a specific activity, but in the context, like as I'm talking or as I'm teaching, there's something that is related to what we are discussing, and then we share. Like then I let the students go a little off topic and share what they part of their culture. So I was like looking if there's any specific activities that I can aim towards cultural diversity.
Those are the best conversations, the ones that aren't planned, that just like the spur of the moment, and then everyone's engaged and everyone wants to know and everyone is curious. Those are the best ones. I teach high school, and so this marking period, every marking period we have a project, and then I have 4 Ukrainian students, and the 2 girls were so eager to share pictures of what their high school was before they came and their school. So I created a project called Hometown Expert, and they're going to present it at the end of January when the working period is done. And they're going to present not only facts about their hometown, like population and different sites where tourists can go visit if they were visiting their hometown. But towards the end, they get to add this social emotional component where they get to share pictures of their experiences in their hometown. So if they visited these sites, or if they have good memories from certain places in their hometown, so they're going to share actual pictures of different places in Ukraine. So the project is called Hometown Expert, and they're the only ones who are the expert because they live there and they know all about it. So they're teaching everybody else about it. Surprisingly, out of the 4, none of them live in the same town. Ukraine is large. I didn't know that the people who live towards the west speak Ukrainian and Russian, and the other side speaks Ukrainian and Polish. So it depends on where you live in Ukraine. So I'm learning so much, and I'm sure the rest of the class is learning. So maybe something like that, a hometown expert, if they have the language, if they're confident in presenting and talking. High school, they're so eager to share, show pictures. So that's just something that I'm doing this marking period.
I mean, if I can share one connection I have to what Yaset was sharing is Google Maps. With Google Maps, the students can take us anywhere in the world. So I've used that a few times to learn more about my students and where they're coming from and what, the places that are most special to them. I have a question for Melisa. Kathleen, Melisa, do you have recommendations for ways to connect with families and learning about them and finding ways to connect them with the classroom?
With me personally, because I know I'm hearing now different, you guys have different populations. For me, I've always found it easy because I speak the language, and I'm also Latina. So I can only speak to that experience. And for me, is always finding the time during back to school night to share my story with them and their kids, that I also came from similar upbringings, letting them know that I empathize with what they're going through, because I also grew up with a single mother. So letting them know that I understand that sometimes the homework won't get done, that I understand that sometimes they might not be able to help their child, but just having that empathy for me, letting them know, opening myself up to the point where I'm letting them know my trajectory, that, I also came from similar upbringing and I was able to succeed, and how sharing what were those things and how I would need their help, because this is a partnership, so that we can make sure that parents and teachers together can make sure that the students succeed, that it's not just up to me, that it's up to both of us. So having the empathy, having the open, honest conversation, and letting them know they too, they matter. Sometimes parents think, and I think also it's a cultural thing. In other countries, I know like teachers, you don't question a teacher, they know everything. And I'm like, no, you need to also let me in, teach me, let me know about your child. How can I be better for your child? And understanding the different family dynamics.
Oh, thanks for sharing your picture.
I'm thinking aloud now that the holidays are here. How about sharing music from different culture? Because holidays, there is a lot of Christmas, like we have the holiday songs. How about from different parts of the world, all different music?
That's a great idea. I'm sorry, Melissa.
No, I love that. We're talking food, but we're also talking music. We all love music, and it's such a way to even express ourselves. And even think about when we do the ball drop, they show different countries all over the world. How does that celebration look like? So music is amazing. I actually play during free writing. I play Christmas music for them. And during Hispanic Heritage Month, I'm always playing music from different Latin American countries. So yeah, I think music, it really speaks to the kids. They really love it.
Even as I say that, I do have concern if I ask them to come up with their favorite music, it might end up some of those American pop music.
We were learning about holidays around the world, and today we discussed the holiday Christmas in Australia, and it's summertime over there in December. So the tradition is a Santa, takes off his Santa suit and he goes into his beach wear. So some of the Christmas music that we're used to has snow, cold, the weather outside is frightful. And they were saying how in Australia, they changed the lyrics to kind of match their weather because it's hot over there now and it's summer. So that's interesting because if you have students from South America or Latin America, it is summer over there. In parts of the world, it's summer during the holidays. When Melissa mentioned the ball drop, my kids didn't know what that was because in Honduras and El Salvador, they don't watch the ball drop. That's not how they do it. So they go outside with like this aluminum slab and they drag it. And then the louder the noise and the bigger the crowd following that is, the more prosperous the year is going to be. So they're like, oh yeah, the crowds would come and everyone's just following this noise. And that's how they ring in the new year. So I'm learning so much, and I'm sure, so it's great. It's great to hear what every country does or how they celebrate. So that I'm glad you shared that, Ajitha, about the holidays and the music and the traditions. We can continue sharing. I'm going to drop the PD link in the chat. You can fill it out, give us your feedback, and then you'll get an email with the PD certificate.
Thank you everyone again for joining me and for taking part in the conversation. I really love what Ms. Gordon shared about also talking about different, how other people do the holidays around this time. And I think, being mindful of that, that is to learn about other cultures is equally important. So thank you.
Yes, and we want to thank you, Melissa, for a great presentation, for getting our wheels turning and how we can have more culturally inclusive classrooms and a more culturally inclusive environment. We want to thank you for a great and awesome presentation. And I want to let everyone know that this recording will be uploaded to our YouTube page, the Passaic County chapter of NJTESOL-NJBE's YouTube page. It takes a little while, so check in. By the end of next week, we'll have November session. So definitely in January, look out for this recording. It'll be there. Oh, thank you for joining us, Brian. You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Happy holiday.
Bye, everyone. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for joining us.
Great presentation, Melissa. That was wonderful.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to stop the recording and